That's me. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for a bus that'll take me to a plane that'll take me to South Carolina. I've never been to South Carolina. I don't even know anybody there. But I needed to know more about a man named Alvin Green. And I wasn't the only one looking for answers.
I've covered politics for a long time, but these Democratic candidates in South Carolina, this is about as strange as it gets.
You can't make this up, Wolf. Right now, Democrats in South Carolina are spinning theories about how this total unknown got on the ballot under their radar and then won.
I don't know where he came from. I don't know where he got his $10,400.
Candidate Alvin Green of South Carolina has been called a lot of things, including unqualified and even a Republican plant.
Is he a legitimate candidate? It doesn't appear so to me. I mean, it was a mysterious deal. He didn't campaign. He had no campaign funds. Yeah.
I got 60% of the vote, and 60% is not luck.
In June of 2010, unemployed Alvin Green won South Carolina's Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate. Green had no website, no lawn signs. He didn't even own a cell phone. He won in a landslide.
But 60% of the vote is not luck.
Wait, what the fuck?
How is it that in our data-filled information age, I can know exactly what my high school girlfriend's cat had for breakfast, but nobody could figure out how this complete political unknown won a U.S. Senate nomination?
And how does the president react to this, and will he support nominee Green?
I think the South Carolina party is rightly looking into the circumstances of
Tell us
of that
what the
nomination.
president's going to do.
Well, I don't know that the South Carolina Democratic Party has settled on him as a nominee. Thank you.
Voting is the most important civic duty we have, so we do need to know that our votes count. Plus, we're the United States of America. We define ourselves to the world as the gold standard of democratic elections. That means we should be able to explain and prove with complete transparency all election outcomes. And if we can't do that, are we the democracy we think we are? Growing up, two of my heroes were Ben Franklin and James Bond. Franklin's desire for a country of no taxation without representation is easy to understand. It's an idea that's right on the money. But Bond's motivation isn't so clear. Why does he do it? Why is he always willing to risk everything for Queen and country? Think about it. We never really know. The answer might be in a quote from 007's creator, writer Ian Fleming, who once said, "Never say no to adventures. Always say yes. Otherwise, you'll lead a very dull life." I can't say I was looking for adventure, but there it was. And while I don't know anything about making documentaries, I had reached that cliched moment where I did fear leading a dull life.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Don't eat the cameras, okay? I'm gonna need that.
160 HA.
So I set out on a quest. I was going to solve the mystery in South Carolina. I was going to figure out how Alvin Green won his U.S. Senate nomination. And in the words of Ben Franklin, well done is better than well said.
So it was pretty surprising. I first read about the election in the newspaper and hadn't heard of Alvin Green.
Wait a minute, hang on one second.
Yep.
I'm sorry, we're getting this interference. Okay, so let's try to. Fuck.
I'm feeling bad for you.
Oh, no.
Sorry, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing near you.
Oh, no.
Well, frankly, I was surprised because Alvin Green pretty much came out of nowhere.
Shocked. I had no clue whatsoever who Alvin Green was.
When you first heard about it, what was your response? What did you think?
I thought that it was. I didn't really know what to think.
Nobody had answers. But as I traveled through the state, I did hear some good theories.
The Republicans have gotten him elected.
Democratic voters like Alvin Green's name better.
Randomly, through chance alone, got elected.
The Illuminati's out there.
But the idea that Alvin Green won because of some conspiracy from Washington would be easier to believe than how he may have really won, which is just people weren't paying attention.
Al Green is a well-known singer, and maybe they thought they were voting for the real Al Green, but most people know better.
Sure, Al Green, the singer, who's actually going to be in town in a couple of weeks. That's a really funny thing, and that may have been it.
And then to know that Reverend Al Green was here. I'm so in love with you.
People love his music, and I think they just looked at Alvin Green. They figured, how bad could he be?
I haven't heard that one, but that's a really good theory. It's in keeping with a lot of the other theories that I have heard. The leading theory that makes sense to me is that his name was at the top of the ballot, that he was running against a guy who didn't have the best name recognition.
George W. Bush never would have been elected governor of Texas or president of the United States if his name was something other than George Bush. He had a very famous name, and a lot of people liked his dad, and I'm one of them. They looked at the son and they said, well, how bad can he be? And look at who his parents are.
There was a good movie starring Eddie Murphy in the early 90s called The Distinguished Gentleman, where he gets elected, and he's elected with the last name Johnson, and his slogan is, the name you know.
My name is Johnson. Jeff Johnson, the name you know.
Well, that's a name even our Alzheimer's group will remember.
Perhaps the cynic in me says, yes, name recognition is vitally important in terms of getting elected. What the Alvin Green thing says is perhaps it may be the most important thing.
I think I voted for Alvin Green.
Do you know why?
No, I just voted.
I haven't really put too much thought in, man. The wave's been really good lately. I've been surfing.
Well, Alvin Green's cool. We're family.
Is that right?
Yeah, so turn it off, okay?
How are you related to
Alvin? Alvin Green is my aunt's nephew. I ain't got nothing to say about it. Nothing. Don't ask me. I don't have nothing to say about it, okay? Nothing to say about it.
I didn't know I voted for Alvin. I don't think he's the candidate we want.
Well, why did you vote for him in the primary?
Because I didn't know who he was, I didn't know the other one, and G came before R. Just a random pick. Had no clue who either one of them were.
If somebody's uninformed, they're much more likely to make a weird choice, and a choice that makes no sense to people in rhetoric, to people in political science, to people who study this for a living.
Nobody had good answers. Nobody. But there was a certain somebody that I hadn't spoken to yet.
If you call Alvin Green right now, he will answer the phone. He sits waiting by that phone, waiting for someone to call.
Hello? Hi, Mr. Green. My name is Jason Smith. I'm a filmmaker from Los Angeles, and I would love 10 minutes of your time to come interview you on camera. Is that something you'd be willing to do?
Yes.
Fantastic. How's Sunday for you? Would that work?
Okay, what about the pay for something like this?
No, unfortunately, I'm not able to. All of the people that we're using in this are unpaid.
Unpaid?
Yeah.
I'll just put that off. Maybe later. How about that?
Okay, can I call you tomorrow because I'm going to be leaving town?
No, well, I don't think tomorrow is too soon. I need about 2 months, about a month or two.
Well, we should.
About two months.
You're going to be so busy before the election, and.
I don't know. Well, let me just give it a while to think about it. Maybe for now, I'm just put that off.
You want to put?
That's all.
Well, look, Alvin.
think you've got over 100,000 people to vote for you. How were you able to make that happen?
The grace of God. The grace of God. Well, so.
I think people still really want to know what the hell went on. I don't think this was the true result of the election.
It's very unusual and disconcerting, I might add, to run against someone in a primary that does absolutely nothing. Let me be very clear. Regardless of the outcome of this protest, a full and unblinking investigation of this election and the overall integrity of South Carolina's election system must go forward.
And what is South Carolina's election system? It's the Ivotronic voting machine, featuring sleek lines, with obsolete technology and elegant touchscreen paperless voting. Brought to you by the folks at ES&S.
We had folks that testified that told us they had pressed my name several times and could only get the voting machine to come up with Mr. Green's name.
The poll worker will activate the machine with this PEB. It takes about 10 or 12 seconds to come up, and then they will press the view ballot and move right onto their ballot. It's just as easy as pressing a button and casting your ballot.
So show me how you choose them.
By pressing somewhere near. See, I was trying to press Jim Buck and it messed up. See, I was trying to press Jim Buck and it messed up.
DRE, Direct Recording Electronic Voting, where votes are captured digitally and elections cannot be effectively audited or recounted. This was your first election.
Yes, it was.
Well, how did it feel?
Weird, and the touchscreen didn't like me. It took me forever to vote. It wouldn't press. Like, I had to keep hitting it really hard, so.
Ooh, one of those electronic voting dealies.
One vote for McCain. Thank you.
No, I want to vote for Obama.
2 votes for McCain.
Is this something that's scary to you?
Yeah.
That this could happen?
Isn't it scary to you? I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
Late one night, I got a call from this man, Frank Heindel. I'm still not sure how he got my number, but he hinted at having some inside information on these voting machines. I asked for an interview. He agreed, but with a condition. I first had to go shrimping with him. You know, to catch shrimp. Now that might sound like a bad idea. Going shrimping with a complete stranger. Sounds like a scene out of a horror movie. The one where the guy goes shrimping with a complete stranger, his friends, some beer, and an ominous rainstorm on the horizon. But there was something about Frank. Something that made me trust him.
Our voting machines are a 100% faith-based system. There's no way to prove that what you touch the button for is actually your vote. It runs through a secret proprietary software program that we have no idea what it's doing to our vote totals at the end of the day.
This is where the magic happens.
This is where the friction occurs right here. Lots of friction. State officials, they work for me, and I kind of run the show. As a citizen, I'm asking for reasonable things, and I think they ought to respond to me. I was trying to find out how many machines across our state malfunctioned, how many of them needed to be recalibrated, how many of them shut down on election day, how many of them weren't able to be started up and ready to go at 7 a.m. in the morning. Kind of a performance scorecard was what I was looking for, some real hard data.
And what'd you learn?
It's nobody was keeping the scorecard. The data is available. It's very hard to get. They don't want me to have it. They don't want the public to see it.
How many emails have you sent?
I don't know. I'd have to dig it up. Quite a few. The Freedom of Information Act request. I have learned over time that that's a very effective way to get documentation from public officials. And I've done that somewhere probably 100 to 150 times over the last 7 or 8 years to different agencies.
And how much money have you spent on that?
Well, I sent a check out today for $100 on one. The personal electronic ballot says access failed. 3 more voters vote. Same process again, shutting down failures, 3 failures and a shutdown. And that happened all day long on this machine.
It's all collected and stored and reported electronically, and that makes it very vulnerable to errors or manipulations.
We have relied upon technology to an extent that is inappropriate at this point. My concern is software goofs, software errors, software that hasn't been properly tested, that we know when it is tested doesn't measure up to standards. I would flunk a senior for these kinds of mistakes. Professional software writers just should not be doing this.
You would flunk a senior for the same type of mistakes?
Absolutely, yes.
This is actually a device that takes HDTV, and I use it when I'm doing my police work.
As I dug further into South Carolina's voting system, I came across computer forensics expert Steve Abrams, who's also a private investigator on the side.
If you have a GPS in your car, we can actually read the coordinates out of the GPS to determine where the car has been. I actually go through the internet and track e-threats and bring them to justice.
Do you have a cape?
No, I don't have a cape, and I don't look very good in leotards, so I don't go that route. I was hired by Vic Rawls' campaign to investigate whether or not there was any foul play with the iVotronics that we have in South Carolina.
And what conclusions did you come to?
I couldn't come to any conclusions. There wasn't anything that I was allowed to test. There's no facility for an audit trail in the machines.
We couldn't do it like they do it on a TV show. You know, like we caught the guy because we got his fingerprint, or we got DNA, or whatever, you know, ballistics or something. We couldn't do that because this system will not allow you to go back.
There is no way, in my opinion, you can verify that anybody has won or lost an election in South Carolina by utilizing the ES&S iVotronic voting machine since 2004.
Is there anything else you want to add?
No, sir. I think I've said all I need to say.
South Carolina is not the only state to rely on unreliable digital voting. Similar election systems are also used in the swing states of Ohio, Pennsylvania, Colorado, and Florida. Plus, Georgia, Louisiana, New Jersey, Delaware, Texas, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Kansas, Arkansas, Mississippi, Hawaii, Washington, Nevada, Missouri, West Virginia, Alaska, North Carolina, Utah, Illinois, Arizona, Wisconsin, California, Wyoming, and Washington, D.C. While the Alvin Green election is important, his story leads to a much bigger question, and that is, how do we know the legitimacy of our government?
We really don't have a sense of how sloppy and how raggedy our voting process really is. In a presidential election today, we don't even know how many votes are lost and why.
Most people, when they leave the voting booth, they feel confident that everything was just fine, they've done their duty. But if they really stop to examine, or if somebody presses them on this, well, how do you know that your vote was recorded the way you intended? They have to say, gee, I don't know.
When you cast your ballot, how do you know that they're getting it right?
That they're getting it right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, isn't that their job to get it right?
Do you trust that your vote is being recorded as intended? What do you think?
I think so.
What are you basing that on?
Just the decent people that are behind the scenes doing the calculations.
Do you know any of them?
No.
Then how do you know they're decent?
I just hope so.
How do you know that they got it right?
Well, I'm sure they did.
Well,
What are you basing that
They
on?
wouldn't be.
I don't know.
They're
They put it
basic.
in the machine. I have to assume
They
they're
had
going
the-
to
they had
read
the
it
proper
correctly.
equipment,
If they don't,
and they had a very good way of doing it.
But how do you know they're getting it right?
I can't be. There's no such thing as being dead sure, but I think I'm quite sure.
put this in the car.
Yeah.
But how do you know they're getting it right?
We
Because
don't
of
know. We got to
past-
take their word for it.
I'm sure somebody, or maybe I'm not sure, somebody tests the machines and, well, that is a good question. I don't know.
Well, we've run into a slight situation here. I have locked my keys and my phone and my wallet in the car.
This is a rental, so don't do any damage to it. Not bad. What's your name?
George.
George?
Yeah.
Hey, George, thanks a lot. Where are you from originally?
Nicaragua.
How do you know that your vote, that they get it right? What level of assurance do you have?
I don't know. But are you supposed to know that?
That is a big storm out there. I feel like it's waiting for me. We talk about the partisan issues of voter IDs, money in politics, and very oddly shaped congressional districts. But does any of this matter if our votes don't count? And a bigger question for me is, who am I to think I can take this on? Do you want to know who you are? Don't ask. Act. Action will delineate and define you. Thomas Jefferson. If ghosts from the past are offering perspective, I need to go back to basics. I need to go back to school.
For me, what's the fun part about history is finding something that's surprising and confusing, and then trying to figure out how did this happen and how did this make sense to people in the past, because it doesn't make sense to me at all.
That's actually what I'm doing, is I'm exploring something that didn't make any sense to me,
Right.
and trying to figure it out.
I mean, you can start with a very basic, simple question, and it can lead you to some very, I think, profound, deep answers.
Do you have any recollections of me at Brown?
Yes, I do. And that's all I'm going to say on tape.
You go back and you realize that the people in the past didn't know their future, and they made all kinds of mistakes. They lived with illusions. Certainly the founders did. Many illusions. Oh my God, did they have illusions. It was a great experiment. Could we make it work? Because all experience and all theory was against a large republic.
I think the biggest danger to the future of our democracy is a lack of trust on the part of the people. When Americans lose faith in the system itself, I think that undermines the potential for sustaining our democracy as it looks today.
The desire for that legitimacy, the desire to believe that our elections actually work, is stronger than the knowledge that, of course, the elections aren't working. That is, that the technology is inadequate. But our desire, felt desire, that this be a legitimate and a true democracy trumps that, eclipses our knowledge of that. Feeling always trumps knowledge, always.
Feeling does trump knowledge. Always. Look at the feelings we have for JFK. He was vibrant, smart, he hung out with Sinatra, and he talked about space travel. I mean, I wanted to be an astronaut. But those feelings eclipse our knowledge that the Kennedy-Nixon election may not have been legitimate. In that race, we know there were extreme voting irregularities in both Illinois and Texas, and we continue to have questionable outcomes today. While there's obvious motive to steal an election, is there opportunity? Where's the media coverage on this? I'd like to know. But what can I do? Go ask Dan Rather?
First off, I do want to thank you for your time. I really
You're welcome. I'm glad to help.
Hang on just one second. I'm getting a little bit of a buzz.
In this building, I'm not surprised.
You get that, huh? You get buzzes and clicks
We
and
do from
pops.
time to time. There's a big construction site, unfortunately, next
Yeah,
to us.
that might be it. I don't know if there's any. It's okay. I can hear you and all that. Why do you think this subject isn't more widely covered in the media?
I don't know the answer to that question. Why the story isn't a big story in every newspaper, every magazine, radio and television newscast, and yes, on the internet, why it hasn't become and stayed a big story beats the hell out of me.
If Kim Kardashian discovers that her mother is not the biological parent of her sister, you can forget all about any important news for the next 24 hours.
To dig into this kind of story and to get the facts requires resources, it requires time, it takes what I call vertical reporting, deep digging reporting. and increasingly that's out of fashion.
You intend to arrest me. Don't push me, please. I know you will, but don't push me. Take your hands off of me unless you plan to arrest me. Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
We can use elections such as the Kennedy-Nixon election as a frame of reference. Certainly there was corruption in those days. There certainly was jingling and jangling of election returns, and yes, it may have been decisive in the vote. These days, it's much more insidious with these electronic voting machines. They get into the system, the whole system.
But what will it take to really get people? What would be a tipping point other than a Bush Gore to make people pay attention to this?
Well, that was the tipping point the last time.
It was the tipping point the last time because it was so close. It all came down to Florida, where it all came down to Palm Beach County and those crazy punch card ballots.
You have a piece of 2000 history, don't you?
Well, right. They actually sent them out to the county store.
$1 a piece, you said?
$1 a piece, and in fact, I can see a Chad right here. There's a couple of Chads right in there. You can actually take this and stand it up, put one of those punch cards into the machine. You can still do that.
You ever do that for fun?
Not recently, no. I think just having that around is a reminder on a daily basis of the fragility of the process and the importance of being vigilant and trying to protect what we have.
That's Dr. Roy Saltman. He tried to be vigilant in protecting what we have. He used to work for the National Bureau of Standards, the people that make sure your car doesn't explode. He warned us of the dangers of punch card voting years before Florida 2000. Nobody listened.
I had written a report for the U.S. government in 1988 that said the use of pre-scored punch cards as ballots should be abandoned, shouldn't be used. And of course, nobody paid attention to the government scientific report.
Roy Saltman was begging jurisdictions to either improve punch card machines or to get rid of them and purchase new systems, and he was ignored.
The sky is falling! The sky is falling!
Did you feel like Chicken Little?
Yes. Except the sky did fall.
The one core value that we all believe in is that elections are decided fairly, that ultimately the right person is going to win the election, and if it's not the right person, at least it's the person that most people voted for. And that's why the 2000 election shook us to the core. We did not see that one coming.
We really didn't see Florida coming, and voting failures are a slippery slope.
How concerned are you that we might have another Florida debacle?
How concerned are you that we haven't already had another Florida debacle? That's what concerns me.
The state of New Mexico actually had a closer election in 2000 than Florida did. New Mexico cast their votes on touchscreens, and the feature of a touchscreen is you cannot do a recount.
It's worth remembering that elections are the alternative to war. We don't really think about that in the U.S. We don't think so much about going to the streets and having a fight. We're more likely to have a fight over a football game than we are an election in America. But we don't have to look very far to other countries to see that the wheels can come off pretty easily.
Even if the media isn't adequately covering all this, Congress must be highly engaged in protecting our elections, right?
Hi, my name is Jason Smith. I'm doing a project on election integrity issues, and I'm wondering if I could get your comment on the importance of integrity in elections.
Mom, yes. I meant to call you back earlier.
As much as members of Congress love when unannounced strangers shove cameras in their faces, I thought it might be wise to set up appointments. So I called and emailed all 535 members of Congress, and I found a few that were willing to talk to me.
You must be able to verify or double check for accountability purposes the voting process.
People ought to know that when they go cast their vote, it's going to be cast for the person they really want.
That it is recorded properly, and that is our goal.
And that people have confidence that is well grounded.
Whatever is required to provide that, I'm certainly in favor of doing that.
I think that there's really no excuse for not having a verifying system anywhere in the country.
Okay, that all sounds pretty good to me. Good intentions. Then again, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So what exactly did we learn from the voting collapse in Florida? How did our elections change?
The Help America Vote Act was passed in response to the irregularities of the 2000 presidential election. And HAVA, as it is known, provided billions of dollars to help states and counties buy machines.
Congress had to do something, so in their normal wisdom, they threw a whole bunch of money at it.
Big money.
Several $billion.
Billions of dollars.
The allocation of billions of dollars is a big job. So Congress established the Election Assistance Commission to oversee the HAVA money. Its first commissioner was former New Jersey Secretary of State, Dr. DeForest Soares.
The president assured me that he and the White House were committed to election reform.
Let me interrupt you for a second. Did he say that to your face?
He said it through his emissaries. He didn't say it to my face. In retrospect, I should have required that he either put it in writing or say it to my face. And when I got to Washington, I discovered that it was all a photo op. It was Washington talk. The Democrats nor the Republicans had a real commitment to election reform. The crux of the Help America Vote Act was not to really repair voting, but for members of Congress and senators to be able to boast that they were responsible for X numbers of millions of dollars going back to their state without regard to whether it made sense or not.
When federal money becomes available, things can move fast. But sometimes at the expense of going in the right direction. Or worse, going in circles.
Unfortunately, a lot of people think the problem solved. We had 2000, it was a disaster. We got new voting machines. That's it, it's over. We don't have to worry about this anymore. And I think nothing could be further from the truth.
So do you think that there was a rush to judgment to procure many of these systems?
Oh, absolutely.
We just rushed into it.
And the rush to buy that equipment from that vendor was like drunk sailors on shore leave.
South Carolina moved quickly. We went electronic fairly quickly.
Maybe too quickly?
In hindsight, yeah.
I mean, I generally like the DRE as a concept. I like technology. I like the iPhone. I like the fact that I can control my alarm system at my house on my phone. So conceptually, I like it. What I don't like is that we don't know what we don't know.
And part of the reason we don't know is because voting is not a federal priority, unlike toast. When you look at toasters, there is wide consensus that household appliances must adhere to standards created by independent scientists so that everyone can be assured that the product has been tested to be reliable and usable.
We have no such standards for voting equipment in this country, and when the commission that I chaired was formed, it was given the mandate to create voluntary standards. And so I spent $2.3 billion sending federal money to state governments to enable them to buy voting equipment. But the voting equipment was purchased with the money even before the voluntary standards were written.
The United States Congress made a critical error in the passage of HAVA, and that was that they put the money in front of the standards.
These are public monies to be spent, and there's a feeding frenzy went forward, like there often is at the public trough.
Why would you ask an agency to allocate $2.3 billion to the states to buy equipment for which there's no research and no standards? That's just stupidity.
It's new. It's now.
Unfortunately, and this is very, very unfortunate, there was a lot of pressure to buy voting machines that when they bought them were completely obsolete.
But by the time standards were set, then it was too late to replace the voting machines that had already just been newly purchased.
If the new machines were new, how bad could they be?
Many of the same people who made the punch card machine said, "Ooh, we have a solution. Do we have a solution for you? You know what? We have these new technologically advanced electronic voting machines, and we can solve your problem. It's going to cost you a lot more money. Going to cost you a lot more money. But do we have a deal for you?
The vendors intervened, and you can make 4 to 5 times more profit if you're a voting machine company to sell a jurisdiction a touchscreen as opposed to an optical scanner. If you're a vendor of voting equipment, what would you rather sell to a jurisdiction?
I saw hardworking, dedicated election officials who, however, were undertrained. We trained casino workers more effectively than we train election workers. And when you see that comparison, you begin asking yourself the question, what really is the priority of the country?
Elections are run mostly by amateurs. So as long as we have an underfunded, undermanaged system that's run by amateurs in many places, I think we're bound to have these problems.
Mr. Schwartz is a Republican who works for the streetcar company. Mrs. Abernathy is a housewife and a Democrat.
I mean, imagine being in a county or a city with 5,000 voters, and you're a 3-member board, and now you got to go out and select among 6 vendors to buy voting equipment. That's not an easy thing to do.
Well, many officials didn't realize they were going to be locked into long-term deals until they were given the long-term deals.
Think before you buy. It says that you have to maintain that equipment in conformity with the manuals published by the company, or you can have a warranty problem.
Do you think that they're fair in terms of what they're asking for, ES&S, in terms of their maintenance contracts and their warranties and all that? Is that fair?
No comment.
And even some companies require to use their paper, their ink. Even though other paper and other ink may suffice, you're barred by contract from using that and possibly getting lower prices.
You know, I would turn that around, because the flip side of that is, after the vendor makes the sale, how are they able to sustain themselves? There needs to be some way for these companies to stay in business. Our lever machines were in use for 40 years. How can these people sustain themselves? And the short answer is through maintenance contracts.
In Ohio, you have 88 potential customers if you're an election equipment manufacturer. That's it. There'll never be any more. Because of that, we're going to end up with, most likely, a limited number of companies that can compete in this field.
These are relatively small companies compared to other corporations that we're used to. IBM was in the election business and blew an election. In 1969, I can still see Walter Cronkite saying, the IBM punch card system in LA has failed. IBM got out of the business the next day.
And that's the way it is. And that's the way it is. And that's the way it is.
And in too many jurisdictions, this over-reliance on the vendor means when elections are conducted, the people that are doing the tabulating the votes are not the officials that you elected or their employees, it's the private vendor. While we depend on them, they need to be kept in an arm's distance. That's the proper relationship from a public official and a vendor who uses somebody's equipment. They should not be our best friends.
Does that happen now?
Yes, it does.
And I could cite a number of examples where vendors have known about problems with their equipment but not told other jurisdictions that use the same equipment of those problems, and then the same issue arises in the other jurisdiction.
Vendors are almost asked to invest as little as they can get away with to give us the most fragile and ineffective machines that we can buy.
Is this a unique kind of business? A business that should be some quasi-public-private thing like utilities are, where we recognize there's a public need and regulate it differently and have it be somewhat unique?
Have you ever heard talk of that?
Yes.
And?
I haven't heard it go anywhere.
So what do we know about these private companies to whom we entrust our elections? Turns out, not a lot. They're private companies. We do know there are 3 main vendors in the voting business: ES&S, Dominion, and Hart InterCivic. We also know that at a trade show in Texas, only one of them would talk to me.
I can't worry about, nor do I think about, that somebody out there thinks that I'm a bad person and that we're trying to do evil things. I'm a part of this company. I have no impetus for doing that. I don't want to go to jail. It's not my reason for getting out of bed in the morning. My goal of getting out of bed in the morning is continuing to make good products and helping our customers run great elections. And it's an interesting thing. A lot of those DREs that are on the market today and being used today were designed using touchscreen technology that was really developed in the mid to late 90s. Although we're used to iPhones today and we're tablet computers and we're all very comfortable now with touchscreen technology, a lot of the DREs that are out in the market today went out with technology that requires sort of constant calibration to keep the machines operating correctly.
The DREs here, none of these have touchscreens.
The Hart voting systems, the current system that we have in the field today does not have a touchscreen.
And is it because of those calibration issues?
Correct. It was a design decision that was made when this device was created, that the designer felt that the technology was not ready to support the kind of sort of consistent use that you have in the election world.
If vendors are casting doubt on other vendors, is there anyone we can trust?
To a certain degree, it's logical. You want modern technology. Unfortunately, nobody was listening to the computer scientists.
It's interesting that it's the computer scientists who are the most concerned about this. They were the ones who came to me in the first place to say, this Help America Vote Act is encouraging counties and states to buy systems that are hackable.
Where would I find the computer scientists who are the most concerned about elections? Probably at a conference for the computer scientists who are the most concerned about elections.
San Francisco Computer Science Convention. Here we come.
And tell me again a little bit about your background. What's your pedigree?
My pedigree, I have a couple of doctorates. Long story.
From where?
One from Harvard, one from the Technische Hochschule in Darmstadt, Germany.
I was at Harvard, yes. I was on the faculty doing... Professor at the University of Michigan.
I'm a professor at Rice University of Iowa.
I work on computer security. Especially the security of election systems.
Albert Einstein once said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. These folks made things real simple.
The problem with purely electronic voting, there's no good way to tell whether the computer is trustworthy or whether it's lying to you about the result.
The machines are designed at a level that exceeds the capacity of the typical county election administrator to administer.
None of the current electronic voting machines on the market are adequately secure. None of them.
None. Last summer, a colleague at Princeton and I took the Sequoia AVC Edge, and instead of reprogramming it to steal votes, we reprogrammed it to work as a Pac-Man machine. So that was one of the more fun things we did. I think I've probably demonstrated attacks against more DRE voting machines than probably anyone else. The Diebold AccuVote TS, the AccuVote TSX, the Sequoia Edge, the Sequoia Advantage, the Diebold AccuVote OS, the electronic voting system they use in India. With the Diebold AccuVote TS, I showed that with just 30 seconds of physical access to the machine or its memory card, I could introduce a voting machine virus that would then spread to every other voting machine in the county or even the whole state and silently shift votes from one candidate to another, possibly changing the outcome of an election.
It's worth emphasizing that complex systems tend to be fragile, error-prone, and corruptible.
That's MIT professor Ron Rivest. He helped change how the world uses computers.
Complex system to perform some.
So I've developed some encryption methods that, as you say, are widely used.
Professor Rivest is being a little humble. He helped create the algorithm that allows for secure online financial transactions. So when you're banking or buying something on the internet, you're probably using the professor's technology.
Voting is challenging. It really has a set of almost unmeetable requirements if you try to meet them simultaneously. So impossible problems are of interest to me, and this is nearly impossible, but not quite.
I've heard you can have it fast, accurate, and cheap, but you can't have all three.
Yeah, people say things like that, right? I think those aren't quite the buzzwords you might want to use these days. I mean, verifiable and auditable, I think, are as important as fast, accurate, and cheap. I mean, if it's accurate, but you can't check the count, you're not meeting the goals either anymore. So fast, accurate, and cheap doesn't cover the ground that you want to cover.
Hearing all these concerns from the computer scientists gave me a new concern of my own.
Will you take a pledge now that you will always use your powers for good and not evil?
That's pretty deep there, man.
Why do you do it?
Why do I do it? Because it needs to be done, and I'm one of the people who can do it. It's important. Our democracy is important. I think a lot of people get involved and get burned out and move on.
People burn out. This is exhaustive work. It is a full-time job. How financially draining it has been multiple times. Multiple times. It's a life and death issue for our democracy. That's the bottom line. It's that important.
Has it negatively impacted your life at all in terms of personal and professional relationships?
What life?
Securing the technology does no good if we fail to secure the machines.
Voting machines are transported in New Jersey up to 2 weeks before an election and up to 2 weeks after each election.
You do need to deliver the machines in advance of the election, and it would be prohibitively expensive to hire security guards for the machines, and indeed you still have the issue of whether you can trust the security guards.
There's no piece of paper that anybody has to sign to show that they received them or that they have been delivered. No one does any sort of criminal background checks to determine whether or not somebody can actually be trusted with the voting machines. So who knows what happens to them? Professor Ed Felton of Princeton performs an exercise every election day. He drives around Princeton to various polling locations, and he follows the prominent signs that say, voting here, days before the election, and then he takes photographs of unattended voting machines just sitting there. And that's for him to document that anybody can walk up to these voting machines, and anybody can manipulate them, and nobody will know.
How long does it take to actually get the virus in place?
I can show you roughly what would be involved. It would involve opening the door on the side of the machine, putting in a memory card like this, then pressing the red power button, and waiting about 30 seconds.
The
Chairman, this is why the average voter now is just so befuddled over elections.
And most of us are average voters.
And since most of us average voters have basic computer skills, what about voting online?
We have to move internet voting forward for our overseas and military voters.
At the same time, I'm conflicted because I get the sense that internet voting is going to be on the rise no matter what the experts say. We just don't really have the solutions to make it safe yet.
There's a possibility that someone on the internet, literally anywhere in the world, could successfully hack into that election server and change the votes there.
The FBI will investigate claims that China is hacking into Google's email system.
This time, Google says, unknown hackers from Jinan, China, a city with a military command center, stole the personal Gmail passwords of hundreds of senior U.S. government officials.
Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups have spoken of their desire to unleash a cyber attack on our country. Indeed, in today's world, acts of terror could come not only from a few extremists in suicide vests, but from a few keystrokes on the computer.
We don't really know how to prevent some kind of virus that would go around and switch people's votes, and no one would know the difference.
You'd hate to think of a hacker, say, from another country, changing the election results in the United States.
Voting is incomparable to any other system that we use in day-to-day life. So a lot of times people will compare voting to banking, for example, and they will say, well, if I can bank online and everything seems to go through okay, why can't I just vote online?
In the voting world, you're trying to anonymize the user. You're trying to hide the actual content of the vote so that you can't go and sell your vote or be coerced into voting.
To talk about this dream of a secure internet voting. I think that's secure internet voting is a bit like the phrase safe cigarettes.
What cigarette do you smoke, Doctor? More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. The cigarette so many doctors enjoy.
Give me a way to do it. If you're going to just sit back and say it can't be done, it can't be done, it can't be done, get out of our way. Because we're going to do it some way or another. We're going to find a way. We have to find a way.
In October 2010, DC election officials tested internet voting, and they invited the public to participate to see if anybody could hack the system.
So what we decided to do was open our system up for testing. Allow people to test it in a sandbox environment to find out if there are any flaws in our system.
Is everyone ready for excitement?
We're excited. Yeah, the camera's ready. We'll see. Sorry, the camera.
48 hours after the start of the DC test, my students and I had gained complete control of the election servers. We then proceeded to change all the votes and find out how everyone voted and install backdoors that would let us change future votes to whoever we wanted to vote for.
We were grateful for them to find those flaws in our system, so we were able to scale it back.
All of this we did without being detected. It was fully 2 business days after we had committed this attack before Washington, D.C. officials had any idea that it had happened.
It's rather high latency, don't you?
We discovered that there was a flaw in our system, and we discovered it in an open and transparent way.
They first found out because they noticed a calling card we left. We had reprogrammed the system to, whenever someone cast a vote, to play Hail to the Victor, the University of Michigan fight song.
As an Ohio State Buckeye fan, it was also very disheartening to hear the University of Michigan fight song.
In my opinion, it's going to be decades, if ever, before the technology is at a level where we can do internet voting safely for general elections.
Fortunately for general elections, internet voting is limited mostly to military and overseas voters. Unfortunately, that happens in 32 states, a number that may go up. 2 states, Alaska and Washington, allow anyone to vote online, and other states may soon follow suit. Democratic elections are not perfect. If you want perfect, go totalitarian. In the meantime, how can we say that it is a mission of the United States to promote a democratic world if America doesn't run transparent elections?
I mean, here we're trying to establish democracies throughout the world, and we can't even show to the world that we are utilizing voting machines that are accountable to the voters.
Some countries have offered to send election inspectors to the United States, and of course, Americans were offended at the thought. And I would hope that the oldest constitutional democracy in the world would never need outside inspectors on election day.
If a group of monitors came to this country and assessed our practices on the same exact standards that we go to other countries and assess their practices, in many instances, our country would be found grossly deficient.
The Secretary of State for the United States, Hillary Clinton, said the U.S. is concerned about possible election day fraud.
The Russian people, like people everywhere, deserve the right to have their voices heard and their votes counted.
How would New Jersey do?
Oh, I think New Jersey would fail. On transparency and accuracy and auditability, New Jersey would fail.
When a government official says to the public, "Trust me," what's your response to that?
Verify. Trust and verify.
We have listened to the wisdom in an old Russian maxim, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. Mr. General Secretary, though my pronunciation may give you difficulty, the maxim is, dovyai no provyai, trust but verify.
Назначение этого...
На каждой встрече вы это повторяете.
You repeat that at every meeting.
I like it.
I like to see the numbers, and you know, most things they say are too good to be true, or they're really rosy. I like to see the numbers behind them. That's kind of what I've always thought. I like to see the backup documentation if I can get it.
If an election can't be reconstructed, then it's a question of trust us. Somebody is saying trust us. Bureaucrats, politicians, vendors, somebody's saying trust us to the public. That's not going to work out at some point. Because at some point we're going to go, hey, what happened there? And we're going to expect that the lights can come on and that we can find out.
As somebody that is a computer forensics expert, what do you see as a way around this?
Actually, I like a low-tech approach. I would like to see us go to paper ballots. Paper is the answer.
There are nations all over the world, advanced nations, that use paper ballots. So it's not as if we're going back to the dark ages.
The best way to do voting with today's technology is to combine paper with electronic voting. So you have a paper ballot, you scan it in at the polling place, and then later we do an audit to make sure that the computer records and the paper records agree.
And there are states moving in this direction. Florida used their HAVA funds to purchase DREs, but a few voting irregularities, and $28 million later, they abandoned the DRE as their standard system. They now mostly use paper, and they do perform a post-election audit. But they are Florida, and they still have election problems.
Why can't we get this right? I mean, why Palm Beach County? I mean, why does this keep happening?
Election day, what happened?
Election day, great day. It was a beautiful day. We had a great turnout. At 7 o'clock when the polling places closed, there was sort of this sense of relief. It was emotional. Some of the early numbers were coming in. We had a strong lead. So when we walked out of the house that night, my wife and I and my family, and we were going to what was going to be a victory party, we felt really strong. And as the numbers started coming in precinct by precinct, things were starting to shift. People were saying, John, something's wrong. I get a call from the clerk, and they said that they were doing a post-election audit, and one of the precincts didn't reconcile. So they went back and they pulled another precinct. Sure enough, it didn't reconcile. The canvassing board said, well, what if we just run the ballots through the machine and see what happens? So they did that. It took about 30, 45 minutes, and sure enough, all the numbers flip-flopped. At the time, Susan Booker would not give a lot of insight as to what happened, other than it was a software glitch, and she kind of turned away and left the media hanging.
Hi, Jason. This is Susan Booker at the Supervisor of Elections Office in Palm Beach County. I'm not interested in having an interview for your documentary. It was a machine problem. It's over. We're done. We're moving forward. Thanks. Bye.
The software company was there, and they did not want to talk to the media, and so we got no comment from them.
Susan Booker blamed the vendor, and the vendor defended itself. How it happened remains a mystery, but what happened is pretty clear. The vote totals were wrong. John Green received the vote totals for Darrell Bowen, another candidate running in a completely different race.
What do you think happened?
You know, I really don't know. I don't know if I accept that it was a software glitch. I think it may have been as simple as human error, but we really haven't been able to get a solid answer, at least for me.
Proving the outcome of a city council race matters because decisions made at the local and state level often play a greater role in our lives than who's president. State and local officials determine legislation on schools, roads, cannabis, healthcare, religion, marriage, guns, and gaming.
At the end of the day, we got it right, and at that time, the canvassing board did acknowledge that the races have flipped. Every vote counts, or it should count, and I want to make sure that at least in this race, it counted, and maybe we can send that message throughout the state and throughout the country.
Let's see your card.
My spot here?
Yeah.
Here's where I sit. And I often wonder if we didn't have paper ballots in Palm Beach County during my election, if my name would be sitting there.
Unfortunately, there are many places that are doing far, far worse, that still don't have any kind of paper trail or paper record whatsoever, and this puts voters at tremendous risk.
So anything where there's no paper record, you've got a problem with that?
If there's no paper today, it's just, there's no hope.
Voting in America isn't the Wild West. There must be someone behind the wheel. Who is ultimately responsible for making sure we get our elections right?
My observation early on was that the average politician in Washington really didn't think there was much wrong with the voting process because, after all, it produced them. And if they were elected, then what could possibly be wrong with the machines or the process or the volunteers or the budgets or anything else.
If you just won the lottery for $1 million, are you going to start asking questions about whether or not the ping pong balls are weighted? No, you're not. Election fraud only happens to the losers, not to the winners. So those people have no vested interest in looking at it.
I could count the number of members of Congress on one hand who were committed to election reform in general and who were concerned about our commission in particular. And only under duress did the White House support our efforts. It was a horrible experience, the worst experience of my life. The hypocrisy of Washington was so obvious that I was prepared to leave within 1 week of having arrived.
When is the last time anybody asked their local congressman, what about these voting machines? What have you done to ensure the integrity of these voting machines?
You can't put a price on the integrity of the electoral system. This is the essence of our democratic system. And if you can't trust that, the whole credibility of the system evaporates.
But why is it not a priority? I mean, like you just said, you can't put a price on democracy, but it's not a priority. We're not doing it. Why?
Well, I don't know. I guess members of Congress, once the election's over, they tend to turn toward other things, and it's really a good question.
Millions of Americans are casting their votes now on unauditable voting machines, and the results of most elections are not audited.
You just threw out there this need for auditing. Why doesn't Congress come up with a federal mandate for auditing?
Well, certainly I've tried. As you know, in the last, 5 Congresses now, my legislation that I've reintroduced and reintroduced and reintroduced would modify HAVA to provide for auditable elections across the country and call for regular spot check audits. That's what you need to do.
So by way of analogy, when you audit a company's books, you don't just check that they're running the right accounting software. Right? You don't just say, oh, they're running quick and they must have the right results, right? That doesn't suffice. So trust me, no longer cuts it. Auditability is now the new cool.
Things could be happening maliciously or accidentally, and no one would ever know.
Voting shouldn't be an act of blind faith. It should be an act of record.
I think the Congress does have a responsibility to the voter to set good national standards.
The way it's been set up is the states handle the elections.
As bad as it might be in some states right now, it'd probably be worse if the federal government controlled it.
Well, the Republicans always have a states' rights approach to everything.
Most folks enjoy the fact that there's local control.
You have many individuals that believe that the federal government shouldn't have a role in just about anything.
Putting all of your eggs in one basket at the federal level, while it has some appeal, if it's not the right basket and it's not regulated the correct way, then it could detract from some things that have been done at the state level that are very effective.
We've got to be careful what we wish for. We could make a lousy federal law, and then we have centralized authority over an increasingly electronic system. That's dangerous.
Sometime between now and when the Earth crashes into the sun, our voting machines will need to be replaced. Traditionally, states and counties pay for elections. HAVA was a one-time infusion of federal funds. The money's gone, and it ain't coming back anytime soon.
I don't know if we could get money right now spent to feed a hungry puppy laying outside the Capitol. That's just how bad it's gotten.
The money has run out. Technology changes. New equipment has to be tested, approved, certified, and then utilized.
It's just like the camera you're using. If you bought it yesterday, it's out of date today. You buy a computer, it's out of date tomorrow. You buy an iPhone, they're going to come out with a new iPhone.
Yeah, but with all due respect, Congressman, my iPhone isn't picking our president.
Well, I know that. But you know what? I've got the confidence that our secretaries of state, our election officials, are keeping an eye on that.
There's no money in local budgets. My county had to choose between laying off the sheriff's department or giving us a little bit more money to run the election. When you've got to make those tough decisions at a local funding level, you're not going to fund elections to the point that they need to be funded.
It turns out that voting is one of the most poorest funded functions of local government. It's a basically local government function and very badly funded compared with education, police, fire, or trash collection. All of those are much more important for the public than something that occurs maybe twice or 3 times a year.
I suppose one can make the argument that voting
with the current folks we have in office actually is trash collecting.
You know, I was thinking about that. South Carolina is like other states. We don't have a lot of money. And so we're saying, well, you're saying we need a new voting system. How are we going to afford to do that? And really, the simple solution is more of a paper-backed, simplistic way to count votes.
This is not rocket science. If we can spend $250 million to build a machine to fly to Mars to send back pictures of rocks, we can spend $20 or $30 million to come up with a voting machine to protect our democracy.
The election officials and the secretaries of state and others are saying, what's the matter? Don't you trust us? We're doing our job just fine. We're good, patriotic public servants. Yeah, maybe. We need good national standards. And that's what my legislation calls for. Good national standards.
Those standards are not necessarily welcome by secretaries of state who run these elections. They value their independence greatly and think they know best on how to run elections.
I'm not asking the federal government for money to run our elections. The states run the elections. States have been running the elections since the Constitution. What is not in the Constitution is left to the states. I like the traditional paper ballot, that a voter actually makes the mark himself or herself.
You have a real commitment to paper, don't you?
Yes.
Is that something where you think the federal government has a role to play?
I don't think the federal government should mandate anything on the states. They're upset about something. You know, they're registering some kind of protest.
You don't think it's against you, do you?
Huh?
You don't think it's against you, do you?
Oh, no.
Is it fair to say that elections are also national security?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I think it would be. I never thought about it like that, but you elect the wrong people and you drop your defense.
If elections are national security, should that be left to the states?
It's still, a constitutional issue.
The federal government doesn't have a role to play in that?
Listen, I work with federal government programs each and every day. And I don't think the federal government does anything better than the individual states do.
Okay, I know it's a little confusing. The answers from these officials depend on whether they serve at the local, state, or federal level, and what party they're in. Still, it seems there's consensus on the value of paper ballots. But creating a mandate for paper would be a different story. And the lead character in that story is the Constitution. While states traditionally run elections, the Constitution gives Congress the ultimate authority in determining the times, places, and manner of federal elections. And federal involvement in elections is nothing new. 1920 gave us the 19th Amendment, which allowed women to vote. In 2002, we had HAVA, and in 2009, Congress passed the MOVE Act, which provided greater protection for military and overseas voters. So is it time for Congress to act again?
I suppose there's several reasons why it's been difficult to get federal standards set. One is, for 2 centuries, elections have been conducted at the local level. Secondly, people want to believe that everything is okay.
So why isn't the federal government now, today, playing more of a role in setting type of standard? Article 1, Section 4, the manner of elections. And if Congress dictated how congressional elections had to be run, then the states would fall in line for local elections.
We understand that localities, municipalities, counties, and states hold their own elections for different offices that truly may not be within the province or purview of the federal government. But I will tell you this, the federal government is going to continue to do that which is constitutionally mandated that it does.
The federal government has played a role in the past.
What about the future?
It is something that we'll just have to examine as we get to that point. There are many places that keep in mind that went to a DRE that still have the backup optical scanner and the ability to go print ballots if for some reason there's a complete failure in those DREs.
South Carolina doesn't.
As I said, there are many states that do.
I still think that there is a chance, how would I rate the chance, good, bad, fair, that we could get national standards. We certainly should have them. The integrity of our electoral process is, it seems to me, as important to the future of this country as anything.
How focused are we on what's important to the future of this country? Time and events move so fast, and there's so much to keep track of. But what would happen if we all stopped for a moment, paused our busy lives, and made a demand? A demand for paper ballots and meaningful post-election audits.
You got to fight for it. You can't let somebody just stifle you from figuring out what your voting system is. I mean,
Frank is absolutely right. We do have to fight for it, and we have fought for it. When the British tried to stifle us about voting, General Nathanael Greene said, "We fight, get beat, rise, and fight again." At the Battle of Cowpens in South Carolina, General Greene helped turn the tide of the Revolutionary War. Yet the war to secure our vote has left us complacent with today's insecure voting. While democracy doesn't begin with elections, it can end when we fail to defend them.
You look like a Minuteman.
I look like a Minuteman?
Yeah.
I'll take it.
I hope you're holding it the right way. Yeah, that looks authentic.
I look like a Patriot?
Yeah.
Tom Brady?
Not quite.
Not quite.
I wanted to thank you for
Also a telling description of how we're fulfilling the promise of our democracy. What would the founders think of their legacy? How we send our best young men and women into harm's way to spread a democracy that we don't even protect here at home. And what do we owe the next generation?
I serve the people of Greenville County and the people of South Carolina and ultimately the people of the United States. And the idea of going back to a paper process such as optical scan, guess what? If it's necessary to restore the confidence that people have in the voting system, so be it. Reputation is real important. That's why the conduct of elections and service to people is important, because it is. And I get teary-eyed, but I take my job seriously, and I protect my reputation because it is all that I have to give to my kids.
This whole idea of making a quest was really never anything more than joining others in making a difference. And when we as a nation, when we the people commit to a challenge, the possibilities are infinite.
The South Carolina voting machines we have had for the past decade have not been adequate and suitable because they lack what is called a paper trail. You can't verify anything. Everything is within the guts of the computer. The only person who knows inside is the contractor from whom you buy it.
Mr. McLeod, over here in the corner to your right.
Yes, sir, Mr. Clemens.
Hello, Mr. McLeod. Thank you for offering this bill. You know, often we've disagreed about how is the best way to go about increasing voter confidence in the system. But did you know that on this particular issue, you and I are in lockstep?
My friend, it's an honor to work with you. Let's look forward to doing it in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would encourage all of us to sit down and vote in favor of this bill. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you,
McLeod.
Mr. Clemens. I urge you to support this proposal by voting aye.